We have a very special guest for you tonight. He has written 2 books so far, and others are in the can, as I understand. One is called The Why and How of Woodworking, and the other is The Foundations of Woodworking. And you may better, though, know him for being the man behind the art and the look and feel of Fine Woodworking magazine. And he happens to have the cover photo this month. I am talking about Mike Pekovich. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Tom.
Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
But I didn't get to talking about Mike's artistry, but that's what it's about a little bit tonight. We'll get into some details of things, but the reason Mike is here is he's been teaching a class all week, and we roped him in to doing Shop Night Live here on Thursday night. So it's kind of a high calling because the instructors are usually pretty tired by Thursday night.
We're doing okay.
You're doing, you seem to be doing great. You get it down way more than I do. I'm more stretched out, I think. But the project they've been working on is this little cabinet, but that's not the first project that Mike has been here to build. In fact, this is not the first time I've met Mike. We go way back to 2018, where Mike was a guest on our little short-lived classic woodworking show.
That's right.
On GBH TV. I know we haven't changed a bit, but that's Mike was a great guest, and he built the Wenge tea box on that episode. Mm-hmm. And there, look at how the work we did, Mike, to get that picture up there. We, as in the camera lady. But that, if you want to build that tea box, by the way, it is in episode 269. There it is on the cover.
That's right.
This has been a great class all week. Mm-hmm. They actually already have the shellac on this beautiful white oak cabinet, but I've heard the story, Mike, but yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like how you arrived at this style of furniture? Because I consider you a real great designer in the Craftsman world, like taking it to your own place and adding your own little elements, and it's gotten kind of like a matured, developed sense to it. How did you get there? Because I know you didn't start out making work like this.
No, I would say things went maybe from more complex down to simple. So started out in college in art school making furniture, so things were a little bit more flamboyant, maybe.
Yeah.
And then I'd been working in a number of styles, doing commission work, kind of arts and crafts, shaker, contemporary, a little traditional-ish. And I felt like I was always kind of working around a target in terms of something that really spoke to kind of what I was passionate about in woodworking. So I kind of took a step back. I was really influenced by the work of James Krenov and his writing, visiting the Gamble House in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. I really fell in love with arts and crafts furniture because you could look at it as a woodworker and you knew how it was made. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like the notion that the bones of something that gave it its strength and structure also gave it its ornament, as opposed to kind of tacking things on the surface of a nondescript box. Mm-hmm. So it was almost a random project. It was very similar to this. I had just made a piece as a prop for an article on hanging wall cabinets, and I ran out, did a very simple cabinet with some dovetail corners and some mortise and tenons. And without really thinking too much about it, something kind of resonated, something got closer to what I wanted to be doing, even though it was very simple and I hadn't given it a lot of thought. So that kind of led to this notion of let's not work in any style. Let's limit the variables to simple joinery. Tenons, dovetails, add a door, add a drawer, add a shelf, and see what you can do within that kind of playground. Mm-hmm. So that really kind of led to the work that I've been doing for probably the last 10 or 15 years. And
That's awesome.
one of the things that I think is fairly subtle but somewhat prominent in my work is that while my work tends to be pretty simple, looking a little bit closer, one of the things you might notice is that the joinery tends to stick out a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's something, obviously, that came out of arts and crafts furniture with through tenons and that kind of stuff. But really, it spoke to this notion that when I used to plane down my dovetails dead flush, and it was perfect, after the first heating season, and you could feel them a little bit, that really bothered me.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean.
This notion that age would make our stuff imperfect. And so I thought, well, rather than try to make something perfect and then get mad when it was no longer perfect, let's have an understanding of what time is going to do to something and just build it into the piece. So if the joinery is going to be offset at some point, let's start there. And not only that, on a case like this, something a little bit more subtle, but wherever two surfaces meet, they're offset as well. So the sides are inset from the top and the bottom, and then the door is inset from the sides, and then the rails are inset from the stiles, and the muntins are inset from the rails, and the panels inset. So it takes an otherwise pretty spare form, and it kind of livens it up with a lot of very subtle shadows and highlights and giving it a little bit more form.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at now. And if you notice on this particular case, everything is sort of a piece, but there's kind of a gaping hole up here.
Yeah. What did you have planned there?
Well, we're going to start by filling out this space with a grid. And then we're going to fill out the individual squares of the grid with smaller pieces of wood to create kind of a lattice work design.
Yeah.
So it's a Japanese technique. Kumiko is something I've been goofing around with for maybe the last 7 or 8 years.
How did you come to working with the Kumiko in relation to white oak? It seems like a strange mix.
Yes.
Initially, right?
Yeah. It was one of those things. I had seen some work by John Reed Fox. He had a Massachusetts woodworker. He had a piece on our back cover. And that was the first time that I had seen a piece of furniture that incorporated this Kumiko lattice work. And I thought it was really cool. It took me a couple of years to kind of figure out whether or not I even wanted to try it. Mm-hmm. It looked difficult. Could I do it? And if I could do it, how long was it going to take me? And I had a kind of a leftover cabinet from a class. I didn't really like the door panel. So I said, this is an excuse to try this out. I was in my shop by myself. I didn't necessarily think this was going to get along with the rest of my furniture. Mm-hmm. But it was just like, you're in your shop, you want to try something, just do it. And you don't even have to show anybody you've done it if it doesn't look good. But for me, it was a little bit surprising, but I liked the more delicate, intricate lattice work. I thought it was a nice complement to the otherwise pretty spare part of my work, where the work kind of acted as a nice frame to kind of take this really powerful element and kind of frame it and tone it down just a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. You know what I realized? I forgot to mention how you're a resource of studying all these various makers has been poured over you for the last 25 years, working at Fine Woodworking. And for many years, you were the creative director, and now you're both that and the senior editor.
Yes, go
So
figure.
there's a lot of hats, yeah. So that's why he kind of knows intimately about Fine Woodworking more than most of us. But what drew you to working with white oak to begin with?
I think it was just that came out of my experience making arts and crafts furniture.
Yeah.
I really like it. I think that any wood you work with long enough, you begin to think in terms of that wood when you're designing. And I think as kind of an evolution for every woodworker, is a lot of times we'll design something and then say, okay, what kind of wood do I want to make it out of, like almost an afterthought. or we'll begin to think in terms of what is a color. Well, I want it brown, so it's walnut, or light, so it's maple, or it's red, so it's cherry. But in addition to the color of the wood, the grain, the texture, the workability, I think it really lends itself to different treatments and different forms. Like oak is a fairly open-grained wood, but it takes a very hard shine to crisp chamfers. I really like that, where more ornate carving with the open grain probably wouldn't look good.
Right.
If I'm working with something like flame birch or curly maple, to me, rather than super hard chamfers and profiles, I think more pillowed approach, more slightly rounded bevels. So oak has just been something I'm very comfortable with. It works within the vocabulary of what I'm working. I love a lot of other woods, but the things I make in those other woods don't necessarily resemble fully what I'm making in oak.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels, I don't know why I always want to think of it as like an honest wood.
Yeah.
It's so like strong, and with the way you treat it with the through joinery, you see that it's really well made. And you use that, you prefer the rift sawn or the linear grain over the plain sawn?
Definitely. I think, like when we think of quarter sawn oak, we're often thinking of that really wild ray fleck.
Yeah.
But what's really hidden in the background, which I think informs a piece very much, is the fact that the grain in the background is dead straight and very tight. So we have this notion of very quiet, very ordered straight grain with this sort of decorative element sitting on top of it.
Yes.
And so rift sawn, where we're not quite quarter sawn, we don't have that ray fleck, we still have that super quiet linear element. And a lot of times, while quarter sawn oak is sort of tied to the look of arts and crafts furniture, I think just working with rift sawn stock gives it a slightly maybe more contemporary or quiet look. It's why I love ash, because you can work with quarter sawn ash, super, super straight, tight grain, but it's very quiet, and I like that. So.
Quiet wood. That's
Yes.
what we're trying to work on. I'm very relaxed about thinking about design right now. But I know what you mean, totally. So it's really interesting to think about it, wood in that way. Now, sometimes though, to the material, you like to add a contrast or something that counterbalances what's going on. And how do you think that happens with the Kumiko and this type of case?
I tend to think of Kumiko as like a really potent spice when you're cooking. A little bit goes a long way. So I think that it's easy to let that overpower a piece or become the main focal point. But I think if we can kind of constrain it in an otherwise kind of simple, massive form, I think they work together. I think the form acts as a nice frame to the Kumiko, but the Kumiko adds a really nice visual pop to the piece itself. And I think I like the balance of kind of juxtaposing elements where you can get out of hand a little bit, but I think when you nail it, I like the piece where it just comes alive a little bit. Yeah. So mentioned quiet. I don't like a piece of furniture which is just kind of there and doesn't add to the soundtrack or the ambiance of its setting. At the same time, something super wild and crazy might be a little bit too loud and wear out its welcome after 6 months. But to find that balance, I think James Kranoff said something like, piece of furniture shouldn't be silent, it shouldn't shout, but it should sing. So I think it's that, adding the Kumiko for me adds a little bit of a melody to the structure of the work that I'm making.
Yeah. It's as if the Kumiko is in harmony with the white oak. No, but it's really great. I'm just stunned looking at this piece. Like, this is Thursday, and it's already got shellac and wax on the case. Yeah. And the project for tomorrow, I'm sorry for you who aren't here, you don't get to participate, but they'll be making the Kumiko. I always want to put the accent on, but there's no accent on any of those syllables, right?
That's okay. No matter what, we're probably pronouncing it wrong. That's okay.
Kumiko. The Kumiko. is the project for tomorrow. So all the students are going to be making this grid, but you're going to give us a little overview, quick preview of what goes into making that,
Yes.
that grid.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy teaching it because it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
And as impressive as the final result is, it's not that difficult to get there. So Kumiko, in its traditional form, it's typically seen as more of an architectural element in Japan in sliding screens, an architectural element. So in the West, I'd seen it maybe a small example that was framed in a picture frame. And I had mentioned earlier that the first piece of furniture I had been exposed to was this really beautiful little sideboard on the back cover of Fine Woodworking. This was by John Reed Fox.
Oh, nice.
And it just, again, I think he does a wonderful job of framing in the Kumiko, but allowing it, in this case, as a pair of sliding doors to really elevate this piece. So that was my first inspiration. And the Kumiko is really, you're just creating a grid of simple half-lap joinery. And for me, I'll just make the grid using a simple kind of a finger joint jig at the table saw, where you make a kerf, you put that kerf on a little indexing stick attached to a fence, and you just repeat that until you have your notches going down the line. And then from there, I'll just rip those into individual strips. And so we have these notch strips, and they go together kind of just like Legos.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really simple process. And, you know, you can make this as big as you want. I think there's kind of a basic range of sizes where squares can get so big until they subdivide into smaller squares, or vice versa. If something gets so small, I think there's a range of the size because you're filling out each of the individual squares with smaller pieces. So I think a good size for me is typically anywhere from maybe 1¼ to 2½ inch square pieces. So for this, as I kind of pointed to, we're just starting with basically an 8 square grid, kind of a 2x4 grid. And from there, we're going to fill out each of the squares with individual pieces. There's a number of ways to do this. I use blocks that are beveled on the ends. And in addition, there's a sliding stop, and that helps me dial in the exact length of the parts while beveling the ends to precise angles. And so for this particular design, we are just filling out each individual square with the main diagonal.
And you just cut the joinery with a chisel like that?
Yeah, nice sharp flat chisel. I like the chisel as opposed to a block plane because the chisel will rest right on the surface and give you a clean cut, where any sort of a plane will have a tendency to cut into the block itself.
Is there a preferred material for the Kumiko?
The traditional material in Japan is a type of cedar, and I like to use Eastern white pine because it's very close grain. It's a nice light color. Basswood works out well. It stays a little bit whiter, but I like the way Eastern white pine patinas to a more golden color over time. I think the closest analog we have might be like Alaskan yellow cedar or Port Orford cedar. I haven't had a lot of experience with those woods, but primarily Eastern white pine is a nice wood. And of course, in our neck of the woods, it's pretty easy to come by as well.
So I'm curious, when you make the initial square grid, do you glue them together when you pop it together?
I will glue the border of the grid together, just because once you cut the tails off, they become kind of open notches. So, and then we will glue in the individual pieces once they're done. So we kind of fill out each square with a diagonal, and then subdivide those triangles into smaller spaces until we end up with our pattern. This particular pattern resolves itself in 4 squares. So this is the Asa no Ha pattern, which is a stylized hemp leaf, which is a symbol for good luck and wishes for speedy growth in Japan. So it's nice. It's very common. I think it's one of the iconic Kumiko forms. So once you are aware of it, you'll see it everywhere in
Yeah.
textiles, upholstery, fabrics, all that good kind of stuff. And so basically we were doing an 8 square grid, which results in basically a pair of designs, and that's what's going to fill out our cabinet.
Beautiful.
And
So nice. Now that one we have in the photo, it has a drawer as well.
yes,
So you've done variations of this cabinet.
yes, again, it's just playing with variables. You know, sometimes it's a case with a door, sometimes a drawer and open shelves, and it's a bookcase.
Yeah.
Or in this case, this is a drop front desk where there's just a single square of Kumiko in the center of that drop front, which is nice. So in this case, I would say it's a pretty small detail. Other pieces, it's a little bit more pronounced. And what I like, without really trying, my aim was never to kind of come up with like a style or a brand, but I found just by repeating myself a lot,
Yeah.
the things tend to kind of sit well together afterwards. So
Yeah.
I'll use it for, again, small details in a glass front cabinet, or I like it on the lids for boxes and also for door panels. So yeah, it's really, really fun. We've spent 4 days crafting this cabinet. Everybody's done a really awesome job, and it's really nice to end a 5-day class with a really quiet day, with a really sharp chisel. We get to sit down at our bench. It's almost disconcertingly quiet at times,
yeah.
because it's like, okay, maybe let's turn some music on or
Well,
something.
you're welcome to. I should have said something. We'll tie into the Bluetooth tomorrow so we can
Not a
tap
problem.
into the resonance of the project
Yeah.
itself. But I do agree. I think we should. So if someone wanted to build a cabinet like this or make a piece and they couldn't come to a class of yours, how do they get access to plans or your instruction? Are there any other ways?
You know, if you're a member of finewoodworking.com, you have access to all of our back issues. I've done articles on Kumiko, on cabinetry, that's all there. I've done video workshops on building a really, really similar cabinet. I think that does have a drawer and the Kumiko panel as well. So that's more information than you'd ever want on making that. Both my books cover various aspects of this build as well.
Oh, nice. Do you build actual projects in your previous books?
Yes, in both of the books, I have projects of various sorts. The first book is, you said the how and why, the why and how.
The why,
now,
yeah.
Now I forget what
The
the title
why.
is.
It's the why and how.
So
Let me tell you your book title. I had to memorize it, and I'm saying, don't say how first. Okay, go
So
ahead.
that book I really, I skipped all the kind of boring stuff I didn't want to talk about in the book and get to like the good stuff, the more, not necessarily philosophy behind making, but how you go about making work that kind of fits the person, the maker you are. To me, that's the epitome of design, is something that just matches the person you are. So it really kind of focused on that level, gave some stories behind the pieces I was making about why it looked that way. Not so much so you can make stuff that looks like mine, but that it might lead you to be able to make stuff that looks like yours. That's the whole point.
Exactly, yeah.
And then for fear of inspiring people to go out to the shop and make something, but maybe not be fully armed to make it, because I left out all the real meat and potato stuff of how to make it, I felt obligated to make the second book, Foundations, which really takes a step back and goes through a fundamental approach, starting with very simple joinery, just rabbets and dados, and showing how they can combine into a really powerful, creative way to work, all the way through dovetails and miters, and then working with curves, and then bringing everything together into making pieces, but with an understanding of it's just a basic skeleton of very simple joinery is really behind just about any piece of furniture. And then for there, something that really, really excites me, and it's something I try to convey to class, although it tends to get lost in the mayhem of making furniture. It's that kind of having an understanding of the overview of the piece, but more importantly, being able to plot a path through the making that makes things easier for you and less difficult than it has to be. And I think a lot of us have struggled when we're first making. It's not so much that we don't have the skills, but maybe we don't have the overall understanding to order things in a way that are simple and that lead to really accurate work. So that big picture is something I'm really super passionate about, maybe because it took me about 30 years to figure that out. But also I'm a firm believer that does not have to take everybody that long in order to get that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that's a really huge part of all my classes is, here's basic joinery, here's how they fit together into a form, and then here's how you can work your way through it. And the foundations, I'm trying to convey that information through that book.
And they're beautiful books too, because you kind of take ownership of the layout, the text. You write very concisely and clearly.
Thank you.
And you work at that. You've worked at it for a long time, so you got that's an art form as much as furniture making.
One thing I didn't realize, I came to Fine Woodworking just to secretly become a better woodworker and get paid for it and support a family. What I didn't really realize I was doing is I was working really hard to learn how to communicate information in a simple and clear way. And then that led to teaching, I think, and obviously to writing. And I've also done a lot of photography for the magazine. I love taking pictures of furniture making. I like kind of pulling the curtain away and showing the beauty intrinsic to the making, not just the final piece. So I like the photography, I like the writing, and I've spent 29 years laying out information in 2-page increments. So it was sort of a natural thing to, when they asked if I'd write a book, I said, sure. I was not supposed to lay out my books, but because that's the only way I think is visually. I started having to kind of make mock-up pages of my books in order to then just give them an idea of where things go. And I quickly said, no, never mind. I'm already doing this work.
I'll do it myself.
I'll just lay this out. So for me, it combines the writing, the woodworking, the teaching, the photography, the layout, and all of that is sort of that's kind of the epitome of combining every single pursuit I've been passionate about over the last 3 decades into kind of a single thing. So super fun. Really, really enjoy it.
That's awesome. So someone who wanted to find your books, where would they even go?
Amazon.
Yep.
Amazon is great.
Mike Pekovich, check it out. They're great books. And how about following you in general? You were big on Instagram. Are you still social media?
I'm trying to
influencer. You don't like that term? I'm sorry.
I'm trying to post again on a more regular basis.
Yeah, it's hard.
So Pekovich Woodworks.
You have some great pictures on there.
Thank you.
Your Instagram page grew pretty big, as I remember looking. I haven't looked at Instagram for a little bit.
I jumped in right in the right window where a huge, page may have had 10,000 people following it. A couple of coworkers at work were doing it. I was teaching. I thought, well, let me throw some posts up. If I can get maybe 100 followers, let them know where I'm teaching, that would be great. And that just kind of expanded a little bit. And what I really liked about it was, first I'll just show finished pieces of furniture. Okay, after 30 days, they were done. So then I thought, okay, well, I need an excuse to post a picture, so I'll write a paragraph. And then that writing kind of really opened up kind of a different way of writing, which was a little bit more personal than writing a magazine article. And yeah, things just kind of blew up. And then I used Instagram as an excuse to make things that nobody was asking me to make.
Yeah. That
was really fun. So yeah, I think I've ended up with a few more followers over the years.
That's what I really like about your posts is the visuals are one thing, but to me it's clear that you're a writer and you think about it. But not everybody can make you come to the end of a paragraph and just go, You know what I mean? Like
Thank you.
you leave it with a feeling almost every time, I swear. And I'm like, man, I wish I thought to write it like that. But you're just telling honest things about your experience with the work.
Sure.
And it comes across as very,
Oh, thank you.
like you really lived it, you know? And obviously you have. So Tony asks, did you use the blue tape and the hybrid method for cutting the dovetails on the cabinet?
Tony, of course.
There was blue tape all over this place. It was amazing.
The masses were clamoring for blue tape. I couldn't disappoint them. Yes, in the hybrid method, meaning we're cutting the tails at the table saw, we're doing all of the scribing and sawing by hand, and then doing the grunt work of getting rid of the waste between the pins with the router, and then we're back to the fine hand work of fitting. So I really, any place I can speed up the mindless stuff with the machine, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
And any place that really benefits from getting to the bench and doing it by hand, I love that combination.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so effective because everybody's come
Everyone's
out really
awesome,
great.
yeah.
Yeah. Willie's asking, what is your thinking when you incorporate rope accents in a piece?
I like, a little change of pace with the media. I like the texture of it, and also the scale of the texture. So it might be like a thicker cord wrapped with a tighter twine. So we're kind of changing up the scale with that. It's kind of a natural look. It's kind of an organic look, and it's cheap because you don't have to go out and buy hardware.
That's
you
right.
Just have a couple of rolls of cord and twine in the shop. But no, I really like that as an accent. Again, it's like a lot of things. It takes me a long time to introduce a new detail into my work, but once it's there, I tend to just kind of repeat that.
Right.
Yep.
You mull it over. It has a really nice texture, I think, and color. Sandy asks, Mike using quarter-sawn oak always gives you a cathedral grain. Mike, I don't know what's the question. Always gives you a cathedral grain on the front edges showing. Okay. Rift sawn would eliminate some. Have you ever added a thin strip of quarter sawn to the front edges?
I have, and that's a wonderful question. Yeah, so the edge of a quarter sawn board is a plain sawn board, and that can look a little squirrely. I remember John Reed Fox, who had done that beautiful cabinet. I was visiting his shop to take some pictures of him with Japanese chisels. He did an article for us. Look that up on choosing and using Japanese chisels if you want to know anything about them. I sheepishly had my phone with me, and I showed him a little picture, that I thought was kind of cool. John, what do you think? Do you have any advice? He goes, yeah, what's up with the grain on that little drawer divider? And it was the same thing. It was just a plain sawn grain. It was just like, that hadn't even occurred to me. I didn't even see it. But it's like one of those things where once I was made aware of it, I can't unsee that now. Yeah. So that one has a strip of quarter sawn grain glued to the front.
Oh, you did glue it on?
Did.
You couldn't deal with it anymore.
Yeah. So now you're right. So we do kind of take that into consideration. In fact, the wood we're working with on these cabinets, they're actually mostly plain sawn stock on the sides. And a lot of times if we're making a cabinet, we're looking at the grain on the sides when really it's kind of the last thing you look at on a wall cabinet. And that just creates really beautiful straight quarter sawn grain on those front edges. So sometimes, if the quarter sawn with the ray fleck is really what you want, then you kind of do your best with ordering the grain on the edges. To your point, the rift sawn stock gives you really straight, clean. And as you know, as the growth rings change, sometimes on half of the board it'll be quarter sawn, and then as the rings start to die off angle, you'll get a little bit more rift sawn. So sometimes you can get the best of both worlds. But yeah, I think it's a really important thing to consider. Sometimes your solutions may change in terms of how you're dealing with it, but I think it's really important to be mindful of all those aspects. Yeah,
that's a great question. Yeah. Mike asks, where else does Mike teach throughout the year?
This is it.
Yeah, right. This is the pinnacle, right? You save this for the last.
You don't really talk about other girlfriends when you're on
No,
the date,
no, I don't care if you mention. He probably wants to know if you come into his town area.
I live in Connecticut, so my home base is Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking in East Hartford. So I'll do a couple week-long classes throughout the summer. That's my off-season haunt. I'll do weekend classes, sometimes 1 or 2 weekend classes throughout the winter.
Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking,
Yeah,
right?
and I'm down at Mark Adams School of Woodworking in Indiana for 1 week in the summer. And then I'm typically out in Port Townsend, Washington at Port Townsend School of Woodworking
Okay.
for a week in the spring. And I also head down to Tampa to Florida School of Woodworking for 1 or 2 weeks a year as well. And that's pretty much it. That, along with the full-time job, is about all I've got time for.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to rope him into being semi-regular up around these parts. It's not that bad, right?
This is
For a drive.
great.
Good.
Great.
Thanks. I'll pay you later. Michelle asks, does Mike have a YouTube channel?
I don't. I do, with 2 videos, each about 5 years old.
Oh, okay. You don't want to rush it.
It was something, because of the video work we do with the magazine.
Yeah, you are
that's all that takes up that bandwidth for me. Yeah, I think that obviously going from still photos on Instagram to edited video on YouTube, it's become such a high quality medium these days that it's not something I just don't have the bandwidth to jump into that right now. Yeah, but back to your school specifically.
Well, thanks. Back to me.
This is cool. So we've got 6 students in your shop, benches arranged here. And to me, this is like a really fantastic experience. It could be the caliber of woodworkers you attract to the school, but just having the 6 of us in a small shop working, really fun, really intimate. It's been a hugely enjoyable week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Glad to hear you say that. I've noticed that by everybody's having a great experience for sure. Just a couple more quick questions. Nathan says, Mike's class on furniture design was very good and informative. I really enjoyed taking it and would recommend it. Also, his 2 books are outstanding, both visually and processes explained. Very inspiring. I guess that's not a question, but it ends with an exclamation point.
That was from my mom.
Oh yeah, Nathan Pekovich. Dennis closes with the question, can Mike open the door so we can see inside the cabinet?
We can.
Okay.
Yeah, so the only thing missing is a ball catch to keep the door closed and develop the panel.
Look at
So
that.
in this case, we have quarter sawn Eastern white pine as a backboard, which I love the complement of pine and oak. Super cool. You have some nice shelves. Something I learned from Garrett Hack is you can go much thinner than you think you can and still have it be strong. So rather than having 3/4 inch thick shelves, which would give a super clunky look, these are only a 1/4 inch thick, and over the span of about 11 inches, they're plenty strong for just about anything that's going to fit there. So yeah, I've learned from every single author of Fine Woodworking over the last 29 years. It continues to be the school that I am enrolled in, and the fact I haven't graduated in 30 years probably means I'm not that good of a student. But yeah, everything I know, every technique that works well, I've learned from somebody else.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. Wow. Well, it's a shame we have to bring it to an end, but Mike, it was an honor to have you here 8 years ago.
yeah.
And it's just as much
Thanks
today,
for having me
so-
back after the last time. That
Absolutely.
was great.
Yeah, it took us a little while, right? But it's been a thrill. So if you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe. And also check out epicwoodworking.com for courses. And maybe you could get in on a course by Mike or someone else next summer. But there's the video courses that are there in the neighborhood and all that good stuff. So we'd love to have you part of that community. thank you again for just hanging out with us. We love sharing our life of creativity in this world of this amazing, beautiful material. And we look forward, the camera lady and I, to seeing you next time, right back here on Shop Night Live. Good night, everybody. We toned it down for the guest. Well, actually, the camera lady. Good night.